This week, I wanted to give just a brief introduction to the unit. This week, we are going to be covering the topic of prevention of overweight and obesity. And this is the last topic before we move into eating disorders. And I actually think it's a topic that really segues the two major topics of the class pretty nicely in terms of thinking about how do we prevent overweight and obesity, but some of those same concepts I think also transition us into thinking about how eating disorders sometimes develop and how issues that may come up that lead someone to some dysfunctional type eating habits. So one of the first pieces that I have in this unit is looking at how we might define normal eating. And I'm using a couple of authors, particularly Ellen Satter and Francie Berg, some of their work regarding what we might consider normal eating, and then particularly Francie Berg has looked at a concept that she refers to as dysfunctional eating, and how that continuum of normal eating transitions sometimes to dysfunctional eating, and then into sometimes eating disorders. So again, kind of a segue into that topic. The other piece of this week's learning unit that I want to focus on a little bit, and some of the work in the unit will look at this, is looking at outcomes related to obesity prevention programs. So there's a number of efforts out there locally, nationally, statewide, at all different levels to look at how do we really prevent overweight and obesity and try and get those numbers down. One really important thing that I want to emphasize this week in this unit is how do we measure the success of those programs, or how do we define success of those prevention programs? So if we're going to put effort into prevention efforts, we want to really think about, are they working? So we can either replicate them if they aren't, or we can if they are, excuse me, or we can shift gears if they aren't. So those are just kind of a brief overview of some of the materials that you'll find in the learning unit this week as we think about prevention of overweight and obesity, and then again next week segue into the topic of eating disorders.